Good. Good afternoon, all. I am pleased to be joined this afternoon by a distinguished group. Homeland Security Director Jared Maples, Acting Commissioner of Education Lamont Repillette, Superintendent of the New Jersey State Police Colonel Pat Callahan, Attorney General Gurbir Grewal, Acting Commissioner of Children and Families Christine Norbert Beyer, Senate President Steve Sweeney, and Assembly Speaker Craig Coughlin. Thank you all for being with us today. Last week we saw unfold in Florida one of the most horrific scenes that any American, and certainly any parent, could ever imagine: a mass shooting at a school. The loss of 14 young lives and those of a dedicated educator, an athletic director, and a security guard, all, by the way, beloved coaches, and each protecting other students from the gunfire, must be, please God, the last time we have to witness this. In the days since, here in New Jersey, one school district closed after an ominous message was found on social media, and a middle school was put under lockdown after a student found a bullet on school grounds. We are grateful to all the local officials whose swift actions ensured the safety of our students and communities. But these events have only added to that knot that many of us have had in the pits of our stomachs since last Wednesday. Today, we will review current protocol and outline additional steps being taken at the state level to augment the vigilance already being practiced by local law enforcement. Let me be perfectly clear. Nothing we are doing here can be a replacement for comprehensive gun safety reform at the federal level, including a ban on military-style weapons, preventing those with mental illness from having access to guns, and instituting universal background checks on all gun sales. We cannot pull Congress's feet away from the fire. There must be action in Washington. Ours is the only nation in the world where these scenes unfold time and again. Enough is enough. And if you don't want to listen to my plea, then listen to the pleas of the students. First and foremost of Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School. Listen to the pleas of the next generation. If Congress doesn't act, they certainly will. But we cannot wait for that time to come, or until the next mass shooting, which, if we answer this tragedy with a collective shrug, is sure to happen. It is virtually inevitable. In the absence of federal action, New Jersey will be promoting a regional effort to combat gun violence by bringing states together in common cause to safeguard our communities. A significant majority of crime guns in New Jersey, in fact, I believe it's widely viewed to be well over 80%, come from out of state. So it's important that we take a regional approach. We're working aggressively on this issue with like-minded states and expect to have an announcement soon. I also want to note the tremendous work done every day by local law enforcement across our state in keeping our communities and our schools safe. The partnerships between our schools and local and county law enforcement are critical to not just preventing violence, but to ensuring that students understand the importance of working with police to report dangers. But certainly in the last week, parents and students alike have been on edge. We want to make sure that they understand the steps we are undertaking statewide to augment the efforts of local authorities. Meanwhile, New Jersey will continue to act in the interests of our communities by enacting the common sense gun safety laws we need. The legislature has sent these bills to the governor's desk before, only to see them vetoed. This time will be different. Unlike the last administration, I will sign them. I'm committed to working with the Senate President, the Speaker, and all of our partners in the Senate and the Assembly to get these bills passed and on my desk as expeditiously as possible. I also support, and I can say we also support because we just talked about it, common sense measures to ensure that individuals determined by a mental health professional to be a threat to themselves or others do not have access to guns. We must make this law, and together we will. My goal, our goal, is not just safe schools, but safe workplaces and safe communities. But again, we are only one state. We need action, not just regionally, but on the federal level. I'd now like to hand the floor over to Attorney General Gurbir Grewal. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. As Governor Murphy stated, we're here this afternoon to say enough is enough. We're here to put our words into action, to ensure that our schools, our communities, our workplaces remain safe from violence. We're here to do what is within our collective power to ensure that the unspeakable horror that took place last week in Parkland, Florida, never repeats itself ever again. And we're here to reassure everyone in this state that as we speak, much is already being done by law enforcement agencies all throughout New Jersey. Since 2007, the Attorney General's office has mandated that every law enforcement agency in this state have policies and procedures in place to enhance school safety in their communities, including school-specific active shooter policies. But as we all know, protocols and policies alone are not enough. That's why law enforcement agencies on a daily basis work with our local schools to train on and to constantly enhance those policies. Since 2010, legislation has required schools to conduct periodic fire, school security, and active shooter drills. And also since that time, the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness, working with the Department of Education, has conducted hundreds of announced and unannounced school visits to, among other things, assess those school safety plans. And while much is being done, and these are just a few examples, and Director Maples in a moment will share others, in the months to come, we at the Attorney General's office will initiate a thorough review of the Attorney General's directive on school safety to ensure that as a state, we remain at the forefront of school safety and that best practices are being shared and implemented consistently across this state. But we must remember that preparedness and response tactics are only part of the equation. The other part of that equation, and the key part, is prevention. When we look at school shootings, in the majority of cases, there have been red flags, warning signs, such as social media postings or comments to fellow students, where perpetrators of violence have made clear their intentions to harm their fellow students or educators. We cannot miss those warning signs. The stakes are just too high. And that's why we will also undertake, in the months to come, a comprehensive review of the reporting systems that are currently in place and available for students, for educators, and for concerned citizens. And we will examine how those leads are followed up on by law enforcement. Simply put, we need to ensure that each report is made in the easiest way possible, and once those reports are made, that they're followed up on appropriately by law enforcement or the relevant agencies. But in addition to reporting, law enforcement engagement or school-based community policing must also be part of our prevention efforts. The Colonel will address the state police plans in this regard in a moment, but I think it's imperative that our local law enforcement officers engage with their school communities so that they can not only earn the trust of students and educators who can relate to them their specific concerns, but also so they can be on the ground and see firsthand the threats to particular schools. And we will look to ways to encourage these types of school-based community policing programs. Through all of these efforts and others, like dismantling gun trafficking rings that bring illegal firearms from other states into our state, or by ensuring that our state's carry laws are not at all relaxed, we're doing our part when it comes to protecting our most precious assets, our children. But as the governor just said, the federal government must also do its part, and the time to do that is now. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, General. It's now my honor to bring up New Jersey's Director of Homeland Security, Jared Maples.
I'd like to begin by thanking Governor Murphy for his leadership on school security in New Jersey and recognize the hard work and dedication of our local, county, state, and federal partners. As Director of Homeland Security, it is my job to lead our counterterrorism and preparedness efforts across the state. The safety and security of our children and educators is paramount to our overall mission. Regardless of the scope of our individual missions, all of us leading the state have and will continue to marshal a full contingent of resources towards protecting our children. As we drive forward in our work, we recognize that constant improvement is the only way to succeed. We recognize that across the country and here in New Jersey, we must strengthen prevention efforts. Preventing an incident and avoiding the use of response tactics is our goal. As communities, we must embrace a culture of preparedness that invests equally in both prevention and response. We will continue to prioritize the identification of suspicious activity, mental health indicators, and ensure that there is a clear path for reporting and addressing issues before an incident occurs. We will expand innovative efforts such as suspicious activity reporting training for school bus drivers and educators. We will innovate our support for first responders by expanding capabilities to create waves of first preventers. And we will continue to take a whole of government approach under existing task forces to provide comprehensive active shooter training, including pre-incident indicators and pathways to report those indicators. The See Something, Say Something campaign benefits our communities by bringing suspicious behavior to the attention of law enforcement. Reporting suspicious behavior could potentially stop the next school shooting or terrorist incident. Even if you think your observation is not important, it may be a piece of a larger puzzle. All suspicious activity in New Jersey should be reported to local police or to the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness via the following channels: by calling 211 or 866-4-SAFE-NJ, by emailing tips@njhomelandsecurity.gov, or by visiting our website at www.njhomelandsecurity.gov and follow the prompts. Furthermore, our strategic approach to security continues to support and build response capabilities. Our first responder community here in New Jersey is one of the world's best. Our local and county first responders, state police, along with departments of law and public safety, education, human services, health, and many other partners have built response capabilities that are second to none. The New Jersey Department of Education, for example, continues to conduct unannounced active shooter drills across the state to test both plans and actions of faculty and staff in a controlled, realistic environment. And we continue to conduct large-scale active shooter exercises for K-12 schools. We recognize the consistent need to expand security capabilities, focusing on where mass gatherings of people occur, what those common vulnerabilities are, and ensuring that individuals, especially school children, know what to do when circumstances deviate from those that they've practiced. To that end, our colleges and universities are participating in a new mass gathering working group to address these common vulnerabilities and build missing capabilities at locations where students gather throughout the state. We will expand training models and traditional planning assumptions to address changing tactics and enable capabilities to deviate from the plans as situations dictate. And we will continue to ensure that our plans do not just account for the security of the building, but empower a focus on the safety of our children and educators. We have already begun to transform our thinking and focus on these essential areas. Over the past 2 years, the state has continually implemented recommendations from the 2015 New Jersey School Security Task Force report. Some of these include the creation of the New Jersey School Safety Specialist Academy and Certification Program, which Lamont will get into further. But they require annual security training for public and non-public school employees, additional training and qualifications of Class 3 special law enforcement officers at schools and county colleges, and new school construction to incorporate security measures into architectural design. Work remains, but there are people dedicated to getting it right. We will focus on prevention, we will innovate, and we will continue to build those capabilities that are vital to our overall security. Thank you.
Honored to bring up Acting Commissioner of Education, Dr. Lamont Repollet. Come on up.
Good afternoon, everyone. Unfortunately, our nation has had to witness yet another senseless act of violence waged against very vulnerable and noble members of our society, students and educational staff. I stand united with Governor Murphy, Senate President Sweeney, Assembly Speaker Coughlin, Directors Maple, Acting Commissioner Norbert Byer, Colonel Callahan, Attorney General Grewal, to share the various ways we in New Jersey are working to prevent such violence. As a parent of 2 school-age daughters and a former teacher and administrator, I can understand the heavy weight of concerns around keeping our children and young adults safe and healthy. The New Jersey Department of Education, and particularly the Office of School Preparedness and Emergency Planning, works collaboratively with the New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness, the New Jersey State Police, the New Jersey Association of School Resource Officers, and many other state and federal partners. For these reasons, I'd like to thank the school officials, law enforcement officers, community leaders for their diligence and responsiveness to recent threats our governor spoke of. I am proud of the way they have followed proper protocols and worked together to keep our students safe. We recognize safety and wellness cannot be achieved in a vacuum or through one division or entity. We together must work hard every day to take proactive measures to protect the safety and security of all of our students and staff members. We cannot control individual behavior. However, we can remain vigilant and be prepared for any or all emergencies. Our experts at the Department of Education help schools establish safe and secure school environments and increase the capacity to address crises before, and during, and after events. Since July 2014, we have conducted 803 unannounced active shooter drill observations in schools, 205 technical assistance requests from districts, 121 presentations to educational organizations, and 91 trainings conducted throughout the state. New Jersey continues to lead the nation in the practice of unannounced school shooter drill observations. The drills provide school staff and students with the opportunities to practice and test their responses. They also allow representatives of the Department of Education, Homeland Security, and state and local police officers to offer guidance and share best practices in school security. Additionally, we also provide technical assistance in the areas of professional development, training on topics such as lockdown, reunification, continuity of operation planning, and more. A recently passed law requires school administrators to identify an administrator to serve as the school safety specialist. This person will provide oversight for all school safety and security personnel and serve as the liaison with local law enforcement officers as well as national, state, and community organizations. This summer, we are creating an academy designed to train school safety specialists. Additionally, we are working to continually enhance our coordination with agencies represented here, as well as other state departments. Finally, vigilance and continuous improvement of school security measures is critical. I am proud of New Jersey's efforts, and together, we remain focused on keeping our students and our schools safe. Thank you.
Honored to bring up Acting Commissioner of Children and Family, Christine Norbert Byer. Christine, please.
Good afternoon, and thank you to the governor and the leaders of both houses at the legislature for making the commitment today and always to stand up for New Jersey's children. As a mother, my heart broke as I read the details about in the news about the Parkland shooting. As the acting commissioner of the Department of Children and Families, I recognize that a multifaceted approach is necessary to ensure that we reduce the risk of a similar tragedy occurring in the Garden State. There's no reason why we can't talk about safety for our schools, increased resources for law enforcement, greater gun safety measures, and increased access to mental health services, all working in tandem as a holistic effort to provide a meaningful response to the tragedy in Parkland. To that end, I'm so grateful to the governor and the legislative leaders for inviting me here today to represent the dedicated public servants working every day with at-risk youth in the Department of Children and Families. The Department of Children and Families is the primary child-serving department in state government, and we're so much more than protective services, foster care, and adoption. Last month alone, we served more than 35,000 children from newborns to 18 years old through the Children's System of Care, or CSOC, which makes mental health, behavioral health, and substance abuse services available and accessible to all New Jersey families. CSOC services are provided to children residing in their own home, in an out-of-home placement, or in a hospital setting. CSOC also offers mobile response and stabilization services to families in their home when they have a child in crisis. DCF offers a wide range of services to children and families who have experienced trauma, loss, and adversity in their lives, because we know that the services we provide today can be a necessary relief valve to provide help before tragedy occurs tomorrow. We recognize that all children need safe, supportive, and nurturing connections, positive adult connections to help mitigate the negative impact of trauma on their developing brains. The department also stands at the ready to assist children and youth displaying symptoms associated with anxiety as a result of what they're hearing and seeing on TV and social media around the Parkland shooting. Families looking for additional information about our children's system of care can reach out at 1-877-652-7624 to find out about the services available for children and teens with emotional and behavioral health challenges. And youth and young adults between the ages of 10 and 24 who are experiencing stress and anxiety in their daily lives, including anxiety related to the Parkland shooting, can reach out to the Second Floor Youth Help Hotline at 1-888-222-2228 or online at www.secondfloor.org. Second Floor is an anonymous youth help hotline maintained by professionals and trained volunteers to help young people cope with many of the stressors they face on a daily basis. And I encourage anyone in need to make use of this resource. Unfortunately, there isn't a single societal cure-all for the factors that led up to the shooting. But I'm very much encouraged that New Jersey's leaders are taking a proactive, multidisciplinary approach to head off tragedy before it occurs. The New Jersey Department of Children and Families is ready to stand with our colleagues in state government to make New Jersey a safer place for all of our children.
I'm now honored to bring up State Police Colonel Pat Callahan. Pat.
Good afternoon, everyone. The state police has long prided itself on being the law enforcement service provider for just about 90 towns in the state of New Jersey. Of those 90 towns, we have 107 schools, which we're responsible for. Over the past few years, with community policing kind of ebbing and flowing, myself and our commanders made the decision this weekend that starting today, there would be troopers stopping by all 107 of those schools. And moving forward, that process is going to be formalized, because it's not really just about the security in those schools. That's certainly a primary function, but it's about giving faculty members, parents, the students the opportunity to interact with our troopers. That's where the instilling of public trust comes from a trooper sitting there having lunch with a sixth grader. That's where they help them with their homework. That's where they start to humanize the badge, and for those young men and women in our schools to start to see law enforcement as somebody that's on their side and not somebody that's against them. So we're going to take a look at those community policing efforts, again, back to instilling public trust, mentoring, even recruiting. And if they're 12 years old today, in 10 years they could find themselves in the State Police Academy or in a police academy, then that'll probably be a metric or result that I may not have the privilege of witnessing, but it certainly hopes to serve that purpose. The other thing I was thinking about was over the weekend was I passed probably 7 or 8 schools on my way from Warren County to Trenton. And I was starting to think about the 1,000 troopers that are in unmarked transportation that do the same thing every day. So I called a few commanders over the weekend, and I want to start with having those troopers, whether you're a trooper 2, whether you're a captain, whether you're a major, whether you're the colonel, to start stopping by there in a regular yet random basis in order to put a face on what law enforcement looks like, and again, in order to give parents, teachers, students the opportunity to interact with us. And I think we've kind of missed the opportunity over the years. This morning I had the opportunity on my way down. I pulled into a little coffee shop in Kingwood up in Hunterdon County, and there was a trooper sitting in his troop car, and I walked up to say hello. He wanted to get out and salute me, and I didn't let him. And I said, "Trooper, how's your day going?" He said, "I'm about to go over to Kingwood Elementary School in a couple minutes, Colonel." And I said, "That's good." I said, "But it's more about than sitting about watching the kids get off the bus. You need to get out of your car. You need to be in the lobby, and it needs to happen day in and day out different times and become part of the culture of the state police, which for some reason we've kind of drifted away from. So I stand here as the colonel to assure to all of those towns, and I think the local law enforcement throughout the state, certainly under the direction of the Attorney General, who wants to take community policing to a new level, I want to assure all of you that if you see Jersey troopers in schools, it's for multiple benefits, certainly school security being one of them, but I hope that the metric and the end results of our being in schools gives the public a greater sense of who state troopers are and what our role is in the protecting and the raising of all of our children. So thank you.
Appreciate it. Now I am honored to bring up Senate President Steve Sweeney.
I'm thrilled to be here today to show my support of what the governor is making a priority, which is the safety of our children, and the safety of our residents. I couldn't agree any more with a bi-state compact. One of the biggest problems we have in this country is guns coming illegally into the state. So, Governor, I look forward to working with you on that and other common sense gun reforms. There's a lot of things we can do, and there's no reason to wait for Washington. The inaction in Washington is actually heartbreaking. It doesn't mean we have to have inaction in this state, so I'm basically here to say to the governor, I look forward to working with you and the speaker on comprehensive reforms that will make a difference. New Jersey has very good, strong gun laws, but it doesn't mean we can't make them better. Thank you.
Well said. All right. And now my honor to bring up the Speaker of the General Assembly, Craig Coughlin.
Thank you, Governor. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me start by commending the governor and his cabinet for the efforts they're going to make to enhance school preparedness. It's something that we all benefit from, and I commend them for their hard work. But we all know that gun violence is an epidemic in the public health crisis. The names of the communities are so familiar to us: Columbine, Aurora, Sandy Hook, and now Parkland. They've become places that we're familiar of for all of the wrong reasons, and the actions are far too commonplace. We need to do better. It is unacceptable and unthinkable that children go to school each day worried about the possibility of encountering a mass shooting. We need to do more. We have strong and good gun control laws here in the state of New Jersey, but we can do better, as the Senate President pointed out. We know that while we hope for a comprehensive leadership from Washington, we know that we hope that comes soon. Unfortunately, we've yet to see it. And we know that while we wait, things get worse. 7 of the 10 largest mass shootings have occurred in the last 11 years, 3 of the 9 largest in the last 13 months. And so while we wait, we need to do something on our own. Sensible regulations and laws can prevent gun violence while still preserving the rights of law-abiding citizens. And we cannot stand idle while we make while we can take common sense steps to protect our communities and our children. An entire generation of children now grows up living in fear. This is a call to action. It's a call that we must answer, and we will. Thank you.
We'll take a couple of questions. Before I do, I'll make an obvious point. The Senate President alluded to it, as did the Speaker. This is a whole of government approach, not just within New Jersey. You can see all branches of government, legislatively and the executive branch represented, and we need to and we will work together. We're like-minded on this, which is a great thing. But we've also got a number of incredibly important jurisdictional areas represented. And we saw in Florida the elements of the Children and Family Services angle, and certainly the Department of Education and Homeland Security and law enforcement. And then, as the Senate President mentioned, it's not just we could be best of class in our state, but we don't exist on a planet of our own. We need to find ways to work with other like-minded states, and we need to be able to be vertical in our engagements, including, very much importantly, working with local authorities in a state with 565 communities and more than that many school districts. And then lastly, we have, as the Speaker said, we can't wait for it, but we have to die trying on getting federal legislation on guns and gun safety. And so that means working with our federal delegation and working with the delegations elsewhere. So this is a multi-level game of chess. And we wake up every morning, all of us collectively, trying to lower the probabilities, put the mitigants in place, work as closely together, and close those gaps as best we can. So I thank everyone for coming out today. Take some questions.
Governor, so other than you're going to review protocols, there's also talk that there's going to be an announcement forthcoming on interstate cooperation. One thing that I gleaned from today that might be changing today on is it sounds like more police will be making their presence known in school. Is that the case, and what's your opinion on
Yeah,
police?
I'll let the Attorney General and the Colonel address that. I think you're hearing a number of things. One is we're reviewing the current protocols. Secondly, we're talking real time about legislation, which I think the three of us are committed to. Thirdly, we're trying to find the first steps toward that coalition with other states. Fourthly, you're hearing we're going to keep the heat high on our federal brothers and sisters in Congress. And I think lastly, yes, working in particular with local communities, including local law enforcement, and engaging even more deeply than we're already engaging. The Colonel, I think, was quite articulate about that. I don't know if General you want to add anything to that, or?
As the Colonel said in his remarks, and as I said in my remarks, that school-based community policing is an important piece of the puzzle here. It's one part of a comprehensive solution that includes prevention. It includes response preparedness, but it's certainly something that the Colonel is initiating with the state troopers to have them stop at schools during the course of their day. And it's something that we hope to work with our local law enforcement partners and county prosecutors to encourage and develop community-based policing programs where law enforcement officers are engaging with students and building the trust that the Colonel alluded to, so students feel comfortable in reporting offenses or reporting concerns, and that trust just grows and helps increase safety, as the Colonel so eloquently stated.
I also think we're looking for best practices. We were just discussing offline a particular county practice that takes place in Gloucester County that the Senate President was just talking to me about sensitizing teachers to mental health realities with kids. So, right? Is that
Identifying mental health.
Identifying mental health. So, Michael.
We at NJTV heard today from former Attorney General and Supreme Court Justice Peter Moniro, who said that he chaired a task force on school security 5 years ago, the NJ Safe Task Force, that it made 50 recommendations, that it was a bipartisan task force, and that its report is as viable today as it was when it was first issued. You think you'll have somebody take a look at that?
Yeah, I may call the General to come back up. We had this very conversation before coming down here. And in fact, there are a whole series, we believe a whole series of recommendations there that are still very relevant, many of which have not been acted upon. I'm not sure I understand entirely why, but I asked General to come on up if you don't mind to give me a little bit more color on that.
Sure. I've spoken to the Justice about the report. He provided it to me several weeks ago. It's something that we've reviewed, and as the Governor stated, there are some excellent recommendations in that report that should be followed up on and that we have been actively discussing over the last number of weeks and certainly over the last number of days since the incident in Parkland. Some are very common sense solutions to school safety, and Director Maples mentioned that when he shared some of the numbers where reporting can occur, but that process can be streamlined, and those are part of the recommendations contained in the Justice's report. And there are also recommendations on reducing gun violence, reducing violence in other areas, and dealing with mental illness. So that's something we're actively looking at, and I've had discussions with the Justice, and we've had discussions internally. It's a great report.
Governor,
Sir, and come back in here. Thank you.
You mentioned that there were certain bills you want to sign, bills that had come before the prior governor and veto.
Yep.
Specifically, what are you looking for?
Well, we had, by complete happenstance, because you can never predict history, the day before Parkland, the majority leader in the Assembly, Lou Greenwald, and I had he hosted me, I should say, in Cherry Hill in an open roundtable discussion. And the bills we talked about that day, banning these guys may be able to help me out here, banning armor-piercing bullets, about 50 caliber, right? Limitation of magazine size, promoting smart gun technology in a more aggressive way.
and defining the need for carrying.
Yeah, so we actually are already on the path of turning back to the concealed carry state law from a specific requirement that had devolved to a general requirement back to the specificity. We talked about pushing back against federal concealed lowest common denominator concealed carry laws. We've been talking today about mental health, folks with mental health challenges who want to buy a gun. Bump stock has already been dealt with. What else do you have?
Well, we have legislation that judges had asked for when people have mental health records that want to purchase firearms. They want to know from local police whether it's a good bet or not. That bill was vetoed.
Yep.
We overrode it in the Senate. We couldn't override it in the Assembly. It's a very common sense piece of legislation that we're going to bring back.
Amen.
And the bill you had referenced before that taps into mental health professionals and being able to advise local police.
The so-called red flag bill. I know there's more on there. There's training that we've talked about. Some of this is very specific, and the best place to go is to see what got vetoed. But there are other things that we've also talked about that have not yet come up to bat. Please.
Governor, could you talk, there is obviously immediate concern about safety of kids in light of what's happened. You guys are working on a range of things, reviewing protocols, working on a coalition regionally.
Yep.
But in the immediate present, what is your sense about only having one entrance to a school open, requiring metal detectors, requiring police besides state police, but local police to go and visit schools? I mean, these would all be concrete steps that we could immediately do.
Yep.
What's your sense of that?
I'm going to make a general comment and maybe ask the colonel and or the general to come back up, or the commissioner of education on this one. We think, again, there's not one magic wand here. This is a series of steps that need to be taken to close gaps and to lower probabilities and mitigate against potential. You also have to, I mentioned this a minute ago, you deal with local jurisdictions here. So the extent to which you mandate versus work with, you have to be conscious of that. This can't all be top-down bigfooting. Maybe Jared, you might be the best person to come on up and just address that question also in terms of locked doors, single point of access. Come on.
Sure. Absolutely. So those are all best practices, and there's a lot of different best practices. We're approaching this from a comprehensive perspective. There is a need to look at all those, as the Attorney General commented on, to look at all of our protocols and make sure that the best practices are disseminated out. In the end, the very best thing the public can do is let us know there's a problem. Those numbers and information that I passed along are vital to letting us know that something's going on, and we can address with it in a way that that deals with it effectively and hopefully intervenes and interdicts before an incident happens. As far as the locked doors, that's part of that entire comprehensive plan that I talked about, and something that we will be working to implement into best practices and push out throughout the state with the Department of Education, the Attorney General's Office, and state police.
Thank you. One more, Brian.
The student movements that are going on, there are supposed to be walkouts tomorrow, March 14th, April 20th. Do you endorse those? What would you say to those students who are planning to walk out of their schools?
I'll have Lamont come up and give us the health warning that we probably need to apply to this. God love them, man, because our generation ain't getting it done, at least nationally. So from the absolute ground zero of tragedy in Parkland, look at the way those kids have responded in their extraordinary grief, to now around the country, and I'm proud to say around the state of New Jersey, kids. You remember that movie Network? I'm mad as heck. I think I'm not going to take it anymore. Kids are showing us the way, is usually the case. We want to make sure, however, everyone's safe and sound. And maybe Lamont, you may want to come up and put a health warning on my plea.
we'll be making recommendations to school districts throughout the state to make sure that they provide a space, an adequate space, to work with local officials to ensure that the space in which they designate is safe, because we don't quite sure to know the number of students or faculty members or people participating in this protest. So we want to make sure that the school officials work with local law enforcement agencies. They can call the Department of Education. We can advise them, but we'll be making recommendations shortly to the 14th date, the 15th date, and also there's a date in April, I believe, as well. So we want to make sure that safety is paramount. We're up here talking about that today. So we want to make sure that the space in which they provide those students, that area that's designated, is ensure we don't have intruders coming in to do things that they shouldn't do. And hopefully these kids will have a peaceful protest.
Amen. I'd just say, Charlie, maybe end with you, and then I'll make one comment at the end. Please.
There's been I think there's a national mental health organization, I can't remember the name of it now, but over the past week said that the national ratio of school psychologists to students is 1 in 2,000. Do you know what the ratio is in New Jersey, or somebody up there know what that is? And will that
We
be
just
something?
talked about that.
We just literally had this conversation. This is not directly answering your question, but this is an indirect.
Charlie, we created a program in Gloucester County after Combine, because what we found out was teachers really weren't equipped to identify mental health. And we had a countywide program for quite some time that would actually help teachers, because this was a complete failure of government. There was plenty of flags on this kid. You hear about all the flags, and it just was a failure. Our goal is to help teachers identify, arm everyone with information and knowledge. So at the end of the day, those red flags don't get missed. If one person had picked up on them flags, and that's all you hear about, is everyone knew this kid was trouble, but no one did anything about it. And I think that's why I want to congratulate the governor really for pulling together the entire cabinet that deals with this issue, so that they're all going to be on the same page, that they know who's talking about what. This is a wonderful meeting that he called together, and I'm proud to stand here with him.
We'll get you the answer. I actually don't know the specific answer, but I love this notion. The reason why we started talking about this on the side is that it's that see something, say something. There's no better protection than somebody who's there, and the most important person who's there is invariably going to be a teacher. And that's where we were talking about this Gloucester County program. We'll get the answer. I actually don't know the answer, but we'll get it for you.
I guess in general, and this is sort of, I think, Dave's point, is based on what you're telling us today, what should New Jersey families take away? What that would make them feel that their schools, their children are safer based on this today? I mean, it sounds like a lot of study, but no.
No, I think it's more than that. I think it's a lot more than that. First of all, we've given short shrift to what's already happening. Secondly, you're asking the question, I think it's a fair one. I'm sending my kid to school tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock. How should I feel about that? And I think any parent watching should feel that we are doing everything we can. We're both learning from what's happened in these awful tragedies. We're learning from some sort of false alarms in our own state, but we also are not going to fight just the last war, that we're also trying to look around corners. That a parent should take away that this is not just a top priority, but it's a whole of government priority. There's an extraordinary amount of cooperation going on here, not just since last Wednesday, but in my own case, being in calls and meetings since last Wednesday. That we have an understanding that a deep, intense relationship between state level and local authorities really matters. Sharing best practices, making sure that we're communicating. I think Jared made a very good point, shortening the time frame and making sure it's as clear as a bell. If someone does see something, that they give a shout out and there's an instant direct line to folks who could come in and help at the point of attack. And then in fairness, there are longer fused answers here. We're not going to solve everything overnight. We're going to close as many gaps as we have. We're going to lower those probabilities with mitigants as best we can, but there's legislation that we're committed to. There's a multi-state approach that we're committed to, and again, we may die trying, but we're committed to action at the federal level. I want to again thank this team up here, the legislative leadership, the Senate President, the Speaker of the General Assembly, Colonel, thank you, Commissioner, General, Commissioner, and Director. Thank you all for being with us today. We talk a lot on our team. Is it a wedding or a marriage? Do we have a nice little event and then we go away and we go about our own business, or are we deeply embedded with each other on something? And I think nothing more than I've seen in my first whopping 5 weeks are we more across different teams, more embedded and committed to working together than we are on gun safety and the safety of our kids. Thank you all for coming out. Appreciate your good job. Thank you, Ben. Thanks so much. Jared. Thanks, buddy. General. Unrelated.